Good morning. It is Sunday, February 15th. New this morning, Attorney General Pam Bondi tells Congress, that's it, we're done. You're not getting any more Epstein files, while making it appear as if Donald Trump is just one of hundreds of famous people casually mentioned in the files.
Then the clown show. That's how former President Barack Obama is describing what's happening in the current administration as he speaks out publicly for the first time about President Trump's racist video.
And our exclusive interview with former Second Gentleman Doug Emhoff on the brave new world of AI and the very real dangers if its development goes unchecked. Plus, much more. So grab your coffee, settle in, and welcome to the weekend.
Welcome to the weekend. I'm Eugene Daniels, along with Jackie Alamany and Jonathan Capehart. We begin this morning with quite the doozy. The Department of Justice claiming all the files that they are able to release related to convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein have been released. In a 6-page letter sent to Congress last night, Attorney General Pam Bondi writes, quote, in accordance with the requirements of the Epstein Files Transparency Act, and as described in various department submissions to the courts of the Southern District of New York assigned to the Epstein and Maxwell prosecutions and related orders, the department released all records, documents, communications, and investigative materials in the possession of the department that relate to any of 9 different categories. That was possession. It's early, y'all. You may remember that 2 weeks ago, the DOJ released more than 3 million pages of documents in what it claimed was its final release, even though they admitted to having nearly 3 million more pages that they held back. As stated in the law by Congress, the DOJ had 15 days to provide a report explaining any redactions made or documents withheld, including the legal basis. The new letter states that the only records withheld in full were those for which such withholding is permitted under the text of the bill, as well as certain privileged materials like attorney-client privilege or deliberative process privilege, which the Act has no carve-outs for. It's not in the bill at all. In addition, the DOJ was also required to provide a list of all government officials and politically exposed people named in the documents, something long sought after by Epstein survivors and many members of Congress. What the DOJ provided is 3 pages with more than 300 names, but nowhere does the DOJ differentiate between those whose names may have surfaced in news stories or random conversations versus those with direct contact to Epstein or mentioned in the statements of Epstein survivors. That is why included in the long list are names of those who have been deceased for a half-century or longer, like Marilyn Monroe, Elvis Presley, Janis Joplin. While the DOJ appears to want to wash their hands of the Epstein files and move on, members of Congress are already saying this is far from done. Democratic Congressman Ro Khanna, who forced a vote in Congress to release the Epstein files, posted last night, quote, the DOJ is once again purposefully muddying the waters on who was a predator and who was mentioned in an email. To have Janis Joplin, who died when Epstein was 17, in the same list as Larry Nassar, who went to prison for the sexual abuse of hundreds of young women and child pornography, with no clarification of how either was mentioned in the files, is absurd. Release the full files, stop protecting predators, redact only the survivors' names. Joining us now to get into all of this, Jason Johnson, MS Now political contributor, professor of politics and journalism at Morgan State University, and contributor to The Griot, and Ankush Khardori, former federal prosecutor and senior writer at Politico magazine. Ankush, I'm going to start with you. One, this letter coming out on a Saturday night tells us a lot about how they think about these kinds of things. They are making up privileges that are not in the law. Client attorney privilege is not in the law. That is not one of the reasons in which they're allowed to redact things based on the law. The law was 30 days from December 19th. So they already done broke the law for months at this point. And the 15 days, also my understanding from talking to the members of Congress who worked on the law, voted for it, was that the 15 days tell us the redactions wasn't just like blanket explanation about why you redacted things, but specifically every time you redact someone, you had to say how and why they were redacted. That was a lot I threw at you, but it feels like this is not going to cut it for a lot of people.
Okay, some of the lawmakers need to read their own law. There are two separate provisions concerning redactions, disclosures concerning redactions in the law. One of which this letter is intended to satisfy is a summary of the basis for the redactions. Separately, they are required to produce what we would call a redaction log, which is a specific indicator of which redactions were made and on which basis. I believe that's supposed to go in the Federal Register. Now, with respect to the concern that Congressman Khanna has raised about how this document does not distinguish between people who are just prominent and people who are criminally implicated, the law did not direct the Justice Department to do that. In fact, hold on, the premise of this law, please, was that the document dump, the millions of pages, were going to allow Ro Khanna to do that sorting for us, right? He is the person who went on television 3 months ago and said, and I quote, Epstein ran a rape island where rich and powerful men were abusing young girls with impunity. So far, he's identified a grand total of 0 people who fit that bill. What he did accomplish this week was slandering 4 people on the House floor by putting a bunch of names that he thought were implicated in the Epstein files and insinuating that those people had something to do with this terribly sordid conduct, only to find out that he was wrong. He slandered them, but he can't be sued because, of course, he did it on the House floor. He's immune. And I don't even think he's apologized.
Outside of the congressman, Pam Bondi, when you look at this list, right, there's also this idea, and you tell me if I'm wrong, the spirit of the law. There's no one, right, like there's no one who thought, you know, if someone sent a tweet in an email, that name should be a part of this list. Pam Bondi, how is the Department of Justice not muddying the water? We have been talking about this for months and months and months. This is not new.
Here's what should have happened if Congress was going to take this as seriously as...
Is Pam Bondi and the DOJ muddying the waters or no?
I don't think this is muddying anything any more than it was already muddied by everyone in Washington, including Ro Khanna and Thomas Massie.
Well, I think that Trump voters have already shown that they are not going to be intellectually swindled here.
Right.
I mean, they're going to see that from Pam Bondi, as they've been protesting all along, and call her out for it.
Yeah, no, nobody's happy with the Justice Department. And you are right. The Justice Department has done a terrible job here, okay? No dispute from me on that. They messed this up. There have been so many mistakes. The disclosure of the victim and survivor-related information is appalling. But, this law was sold to us on a certain premise, that this was going to reveal a bunch of criminals. And by the way, as I was saying, if Congress wanted to take this as seriously as they claimed, if Ro Khanna and Thomas Massie were as serious about this issue as they claim to be, we would not have gotten a dump of millions of pages into the public domain for all of time for everyone to spin up their own conspiracy theories. We would have gotten an Epstein Commission, something akin to the 9/11 Commission, where we appoint...
Or the January 6th Committee.
Correct. But like a 9/11 Commission where you appoint outside reputable former law enforcement figures, you give them staff and you give them resources. That is how you take an issue like this seriously for real, not a gigantic document dump. And the reason I suspect that we got a document dump instead of anything like that is because a document dump was free.
Well, Congress because the Republicans were not going to...
I'm sorry. Yeah, come on now. Look. The fact of the matter is you have an administration that ran on releasing the Epstein files because they said it was going to be full of a whole bunch of left-wing criminals.
That was a bad idea.
It was a bad idea from the very beginning.
Anyway.
What the public actually wants, which has been my complaint about the Epstein files all along, is for people to be held accountable. No one's going to be held accountable, and that's the fault of this administration. That's the fault of the people in the DOJ, and in part, that's the fault of people in Congress.
Have yet to be held accountable.
This is the thing.
We don't know.
We don't know because there has been no full investigation. But part of the issue here is that, look, and again, releasing something on a Saturday night, obviously it's because they want to distract, or clearly they had no Valentine's Day plans. I feel very bad for them all. But the fact of the matter is, when you do something like this, you don't solve anyone's problems, which is somewhat of your point, right? Because whether the law gets passed or not, the conspiracy theorists are not going to be convinced.
Yeah. Right.
The victims aren't in any way receiving any additional justice, and the people who are legitimately concerned don't get helped either. So all of this is nonsense to me. I looked through the list and the names of the fake people and the dead people. I was looking for Michael Jackson and Clark Kent and whatever else it is. I mean, just random names showing up. This is not justice for anyone.
I'm going to go ahead and do
all of those are excellent reasons. I'm going
to do some woman-splaining here.
Yes. My favorite kind.
I mean, Ankush has a point. And if we're thinking about the survivors and what they want, it is the names of co-conspirators and accountability to be pursued and actual charges to be pressed. We had Jess Michaels on the show yesterday who said her document that summarized her FBI transcript with an FBI agent, her 302 that was submitted to the Justice Department, is not in those documents. And it outlined details and allegations against a co-conspirator that she didn't name, but she said is someone who was working very closely with Ghislaine Maxwell, who has not been charged with anything. Right. Mm-hmm. So Ankush is right. If Congress was serious, congressional investigations are always purely political theater. It's why the January 6th committee and the 9/11 commission were League of His Own. January 6th committee slightly different. Yeah. If they wanted to actually pursue real references and make recommendations to the Justice Department to pursue real prosecutions, they should have set it up into a committee. They should have hired legal staff to investigate it and actually follow up and corroborate all of these details that were
just to prove how unserious any of this is. I'm surprised, Eugene, you didn't mention a key name that is actually on this list, who I'm like, why is she on here? Beyonce is on this list. But Eric Swalwell, Congressman Swalwell, called this out, where he sent out a tweet yesterday with his name being on this list. LOL. So one loser sends another loser a news article with my name in it, and the cover-up clan at the DOJ wants to put me in the same drawer as Donald Trump. Doesn't work that way. Trump is a friend of the pedos. I'm their worst nightmare.
This is the equivalent of, those heist movies where the smart criminals walk out with all the hostages at the end. Yeah. They just put on Yes. And it's like, and they just kind of walk out in their, the same coats that everybody else so that they don't get caught. That's what this is, right? That's what this is. Let's just flood the zone with all these random names. And look, even if the law called for that, it's what Eugene mentioned. No, what they want is justice. What they want is justice. And using this as an excuse to say, well, my hands are tied. I can't do anything about hundreds and hundreds of victims over dozens of years. That's not what the law is supposed to do. That's not what the Department of Justice is supposed to do. It's not what Congress is supposed to do.